Commander Jake Morrison sat in the massive council chamber and tried not to let his anger show on his face. Around him stretched rows upon rows of alien delegates, their strange forms shifting and moving as they debated humanity's fate like he wasn't even there. The chamber was built to hold 10,000 beings from across the galaxy, and today it was packed full. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 15 years now. He had watched as species after species treated humans like dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. They called humans Deathworlders because Earth was so hostile that most aliens couldn't survive there for even a few minutes. The gravity would crush some of them, and the oxygen would poison others. The weather alone could kill most galactic citizens, but instead of respecting humans for surviving such a world, the other species treated them like savage beasts who got lucky. They spoke over human representatives in council meetings. They made decisions about human space without asking. They acted like humans were too stupid to understand complex galactic politics. Today was worse than usual. The Zephyrian swarm had demanded exclusive mining rights to the Kepler Belt, a region of space that humans had been protecting for 30 years. The belt contained rare minerals that could power entire star systems, but it also held the ancient ruins of a dead civilization. Humans had declared it a protected archaeological site. Queen Voice Zach Th. spoke for the Zephyrians. She was a tall, insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that never seemed to blink. Her voice buzzed through the translation system as she addressed the council. "The primitive humans waste these resources," she said, her words dripping with contempt. "They sit on mineral wealth that could benefit the entire galaxy while they play in the dirt looking for old bones. The swarm requires these materials for our expansion into the outer rim. We will compensate the humans fairly for their inconvenience." Ambassador Lisa Carter stood to respond. She had been Earth's chief diplomat for over a decade, and Jake respected her patience. She was small compared to most aliens in the chamber, but she never let their size intimidate her. "The Kepler Belt is under human protection by galactic treaty," Lisa said calmly. "The archaeological sites there contain irreplaceable historical data about one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. We cannot allow strip mining in that region." Queen Voice Zach Th. made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "Archaeological data? From a species that only learned to build cities 10,000 years ago? Your people barely understand fire compared to the great civilizations of the galaxy. What could you possibly learn from old ruins that would benefit anyone?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. Lisa's face remained calm, but he could see the muscle in her jaw tighten. "Human archaeological methods have uncovered significant data about this ancient species," Lisa replied. "Their technology was unique in studying it could benefit everyone. We request that the Council respect our territorial rights in this matter." The crystalline delegate Charvel spoke next. His body was made of living crystal that refracted light in rainbow patterns as he moved. "Perhaps we should consider a compromise. The humans could be relocated to a suitable world where they can continue their digging while the Zephyrians extract the needed materials." "Relocated?" Lisa's voice stayed level, but Jake could hear the steel underneath. "You're talking about moving 3 million human colonists from their homes for the greater good of galactic civilization," Charvel replied. "The needs of the many outweigh the desires of the few. Surely even humans can understand such simple mathematics." Jake watched as more delegates nodded in agreement. The depth swimmers gurgled their approval through their water-filled speaking chambers. The granite lords rumbled their massive stone bodies in what passed for applause among their kind. Species after species lined up to explain why humans should just accept whatever the real civilizations decided. The vote was called. Jake already knew how it would go. He had seen this same pattern hundreds of times over the years. The major powers would vote together, and the minor species would follow along rather than risk making enemies. Humanity would get one vote out of thousands. The numbers appeared on the great display screen as each species cast their decision. 847 votes in favor of relocating the human colonies, 1 vote against. Only Earth stood alone. The council leader, an ancient being called First Speaker, Mordan, raised one of his 6 arms. The motion passes. The human colonies will be relocated within 1 standard year to allow Zephyrian mining operations to begin. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Jake felt something break inside him. 50 years of diplomacy. 50 years of trying to prove that humans could be civilized. 50 years of taking insults and accepting condescension from beings who thought they were better than the species that had crawled out of hell and learned to fly to the stars. Jake stood up slowly. The chamber was already starting to empty as delegates prepared to leave for their next meetings. His movement caught attention and conversations died as thousands of alien eyes turned toward him. "We tried to be nice," Jake said. His voice was quiet, but in the sudden silence it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "We tried to be civilized. We tried to play by your rules and be the kind of species you wanted us to be." Queen Voice Zach Th turned back toward him. "Is the human delegation lodging a formal protest? Such actions must follow proper procedures." Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No protest, no procedures. "We're done with all of that." He looked around the chamber at all the species that had just voted to destroy human homes. "But there's something you've all forgotten in your rush to treat us like animals." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted. "We survived our world not by being nice," Jake continued. "We survived by being the most dangerous thing on a planet that was trying to kill us every single day. We survived by being smart enough to outwit predators that were bigger and stronger than us. We survived by working together to hunt things that could tear us apart with their bare hands." He started walking toward the exit with Lisa beside him. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. "You wanted to see what Deathworlders are really capable of," Jake said as he reached the chamber doors. "You're about to find out?" The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like the end of an era. For the first time in 50 years, humanity was walking away from the galactic community. Jake pulled out his communication device and sent a single message to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. "Come home. It's time to stop being nice." Admiral Rick Barnes received the message while standing on the bridge of his flagship, the battleship New Horizon. He read Jake Morrison's words 3 times before he finally allowed himself to smile. Around him, his bridge crew watched as their commander's expression changed from the careful neutrality they had maintained for decades to something much more dangerous. "Communications," Rick said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that hadn't been there in years. "Send a fleet-wide message. All ships are to cease patrol operations and set course for Earth immediately. Maximum burn." Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh looked up from her station. "Sir, that will leave the outer colonies without protection." Rick's smile grew wider. "No, Lieutenant Commander. That will bring our protection home where it belongs. The colonies can take care of themselves for a while." Across human space, similar scenes played out on hundreds of ships. Captains who had spent years enforcing peaceful patrol routes suddenly found themselves with new orders. Ships that had been scattered across the galaxy in small groups began forming into larger formations. Battle groups that hadn't operated together since the peace accords started moving with purpose for the first time in 50 years. On Mars, General Amy Rodriguez stood in the command center of the Red Planet's military production facilities. Banks of monitors showed factory complexes that had been running at minimum capacity for decades. She had been waiting for this moment since the day the peace treaties were signed. "Bring everything online," she ordered. "I want full production within 6 hours. Priority goes to ammunition, ship components, and the special projects we've been keeping in storage." Her aide, Colonel Pete Davis, looked nervous. "General, the Galactic Accords specifically forbid military buildup beyond defensive levels." Amy turned to face him, and Pete took a step back at the look in her eyes. "Colonel, as of today, we consider everything we do to be defensive. The galaxy just voted to steal our territory and relocate our people. I'd say that qualifies as a threat, wouldn't you? The massive factory complexes began to hum with activity. Automated systems that had been dormant for years roared to life. Assembly lines started producing weapons and equipment that would have given galactic peacekeepers nightmares if they had known such things existed deep in the Martian underground. Sealed warehouses opened for the first time in decades. Inside were ship designs that pushed the limits of known technology, weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat, and prototypes that human engineers had built just to see if they could. The items that came out of storage looked nothing like the peaceful patrol ships that other species were used to seeing. Dr. Kevin Walsh sat in his office at the Xenobiological Research Institute on Luna, surrounded by files that represented 50 years of careful observation and study. Every alien species that had ever made contact with humanity was represented in his databases. Physical capabilities, psychological profiles, technological assessments, and most importantly, weaknesses. Computer, compile all xenobiological data into tactical assessment formats, Kevin ordered. Cross-reference with military applications and distribute to all fleet commanders. The data that flowed out of his office would have shocked the galactic community. Humans had been taking careful notes during every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange, every moment of contact with alien species. They knew which species were vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound, which ones had critical weak points in their biology, and which ones could be psychologically manipulated through specific approaches. Captain Helen Murphy commanded the patrol vessel Liberty's Edge in the Centauri system. She had been watching Zephyrian mining ships move closer to human territory for months, following the letter of galactic law that said she couldn't do anything about it unless they actually crossed the border. When her new orders came through, she gathered her crew in the ship's main bay. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that we're probably going to war. The good news is that we don't have to pretend to be nice anymore." Cheers erupted throughout the bay. These were men and women who had joined the military to protect humanity, only to spend years watching their people be insulted and threatened while they could do nothing but smile and file diplomatic protests. "Chief Engineer Roberts, how long? To install the weapon systems we've been carrying in storage?" Chief Roberts grinned. "Give me 4 hours, Captain. We'll be ready to show these bugs what human engineering can really do." Similar preparations were happening throughout human space. Ships that had looked like peaceful exploration vessels began revealing hidden weapon ports. Cargo holds open to show missiles and energy weapons that had been disguised as scientific equipment. What the galaxy had thought were research stations turned out to be heavily armed fortresses on Earth. President Maria Santos stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, watching displays that showed human ships moving from every corner of the galaxy. Her military advisors surrounded the main table, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and concern. "Status report," she ordered. General Dan Foster stepped forward. "All deep space fleets are responding to recall orders. Estimated time for full concentration is 72 hours. Mars production facilities are at full capacity. Our intelligence networks are active and providing real-time data on alien fleet movements." "What about the colonies?" "They're implementing contingency plan 7. Local defense forces are activating hidden fortifications and the civilian populations are moving to secured areas. Everyone knows what's coming." Maria nodded. Contingency Plan 7 had been developed in secret 20 years ago by military planners who believed that humanity's peaceful approach wouldn't last forever. Every colony, every outpost, every human settlement had preparations for the day when diplomacy failed. "Send a message to all human commanders," Maria said. "As of now, we are operating under total defense authorization. Protect human interests. By any means necessary, the gloves are off." Back in space, Admiral Rick Barnes watched as his fleet grew larger by the hour. Ships arrived from every direction, forming battle groups that represented the true strength of human military power. What impressed him most wasn't the number of ships. But how quickly his crews adapted to their new mission. For 50 years, human military personnel had been trained to de-escalate situations, to find peaceful solutions, to avoid conflict at all costs. But underneath that training was something much older and more fundamental. These were the descendants of people who had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most species. When the situation demanded it, they could become exactly what their ancestors had been. Communications. Open a channel to all fleet commanders, Rick ordered. Dozens of faces appeared on his screen, representing every major human fleet in the galaxy. These were people he had known for years as careful diplomats and peacekeepers. Now he could see something different in their eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "for the first time in our careers, we get to show the galaxy what human military doctrine really looks like when we're not holding back. Our ancestors didn't conquer a death world by being nice. They did it by being smart, aggressive, and absolutely ruthless when necessary." He paused, looking at each face on the screen. The galaxy wanted to see what we're capable of. Let's show them why Earth is classified as a death world and why the species that evolved there shouldn't be pushed too far. The communication ended, and Rick turned back to watch his growing fleet. Soon they would be ready. Soon, the galaxy would learn that 50 years of human patience had not been weakness, it had been preparation. The Zephyrian mining fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler belt, expecting to find the usual token human resistance. Queen Voice Zach TH stood on the bridge of her command ship, the Swarm's Glory, and looked at the sensor readings with satisfaction. The belt contained more rare minerals than her people could mine in a century. "Deploy the mining platforms," she ordered. "Begin extraction operations in Sector 7. If any human ships approach, transmit standard territorial warnings." Her tactical officer, sub-voice Krikhan, buzzed nervously. "My Queen Voice sensors are detecting a large formation of human vessels on our approach vector." Zach TH's compound eyes focused on the main display. Where she expected to see a handful of patrol ships, she instead saw an entire fleet. Dozens of human vessels in tight formation, moving with precision that seemed impossible for such a supposedly primitive species. "How many ships?" she demanded. 147 vessels, my Queen Voice. Configuration unknown. They appear to be broadcasting on all frequencies." The main screen filled with the image of a human female in military uniform. Admiral Susan Clark's face was calm, but her eyes held something that made Zaktiet's instincts scream warnings. "This is Admiral Clark of the Human Defense Fleet," the human said. "You are in violation of human territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Zach TH made the sound that her species used for laughter. "Human, you are outnumbered. 3-1. The Galactic Council has granted us mining rights to this region. You will withdraw or be removed." Admiral Clark's expression didn't change. "You wanted our territory. Come and take it." The communication ended and Zach TH turned to her weapons officer. "Destroy their lead ships. The rest will flee when they see our power." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a wild attack as expected. Instead, they seemed to simply vanish from sensors for a moment. Before reappearing in a completely different formation, the Zephyrian ships found themselves separated and surrounded. Human vessels appeared from impossible angles, using the asteroids themselves as cover and launching points. Weapons fire erupted from directions that shouldn't have been possible. "How are they moving like that?" Krikhan demanded before Zach TH could answer. 3 human ships materialized directly above the Swarm's Glory, their weapons fired in perfect coordination, overwhelming the command ship's shields in seconds. The bridge filled with smoke and the sound of dying electronics. Admiral Clark's voice came through the emergency communications. "Your ancestors were prey animals on your homeworld. Ours were pack hunters. We've been coordinating attacks like this for millions of years." Across the battlefield, the Zephyrian fleet was being systematically destroyed. Human ships moved in groups of 3 or 4, supporting each other with tactical precision that seemed almost telepathic. They used the asteroid field like a three-dimensional maze, appearing from hiding spots to strike and then vanishing again, before return fire could be effective. But the most terrifying part wasn't their coordination. It was their weapons. Energy beams that cut through Zephyrian armor like it was paper. Missiles that seemed to think for themselves, dodging defensive fire to strike critical systems. And something else, something that made the asteroids themselves. "Move, my queen voice," her science officer reported. "The humans are using gravitational manipulation to alter asteroid trajectories. They're turning the entire belt into a weapon." Zack watched in horror as a massive asteroid pushed by invisible forces slammed into one of her heavy cruisers. The ship crumpled like an insect under a boot. "Retreat," she ordered. "All ships retreat to safe distance." But the humans weren't done. As the surviving Zephyrian ships tried to escape, human vessels pursued them with relentless efficiency. They didn't just want to win the battle. They wanted to send a message. Meanwhile, in the Tau Ceti system, the Crystalline Collective was learning its own lesson about underestimating humans. Their pacification spheres, massive vessels designed to subdue primitive populations with psychic suppression fields, approached the human colony world of New Dakota. Collective Mind Charvel had been confident in his species' approach. Crystalline psychic abilities could paralyze most organic minds, leaving populations docile and easily relocated. Humans were just another biological species. The process should have been simple. Colonel Mike Bennett stood in the command bunker beneath New Dakota's capital city and watched the alien ships descend through the atmosphere. Around him, his staff prepared for an attack unlike anything they had faced before. "Sir, the psychic suppression field is activating," reported Major Lisa Hayes. "All personnel should begin experiencing paralysis and disorientation." Instead, Bennett felt a surge of rage so intense it surprised him. Around the bunker, other officers were having similar reactions. The crystalline psychic field, designed to suppress aggressive thoughts, was having the opposite effect on human minds. "It's not working," Bennett said with a grin that would have terrified the aliens above. "Their psychic attacks are making us angry instead of docile." He opened a communication channel to all colonial defense forces. "All units, this is Colonel Bennett. The enemy is using psychic warfare against us, and it's not going according to their plan. Use that anger. Channel it. Show them what humans do when you try to mess with our minds." Across New Dakota, human defenders who should have been paralyzed were instead filled with berserker rage. Hidden weapon emplacements rose from concealed positions. Surface-to-air missiles launched from sites that hadn't appeared on any alien scans. And from the forests and mountains, human forces began implementing tactics that would have been considered war crimes by galactic standards. The colonists knew their world better than any orbital survey could reveal. They had spent decades preparing defensive positions in caves, canyons, and underground complexes. When the crystalline ground forces landed, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Bennett's forces used the planet itself as a weapon. They triggered avalanches to bury alien formations. They collapsed caves to trap enemy units underground. They used their knowledge of local weather patterns to time attacks. During sandstorms and electrical storms that disrupted alien sensors, Collective Mind, one of his subunits reported, the humans are not responding to pacification protocols. They appear to be immune to our psychic suppression. Charvel focused his crystalline consciousness on the problem. His species had never encountered a biological entity that could resist their mental influence. Increase suppression field intensity. Their primitive minds must eventually succumb. The result was catastrophic for the crystalline forces. Stronger psychic attacks only made the humans more enraged and more dangerous. Colonial militia units that had been trained for basic defense were now fighting with the fury of their ancient ancestors. They used improvised weapons, guerrilla tactics, and a level of violence that shocked the galaxy. Colonel Bennett's final message to the Crystalline Fleet became legendary. "This is what you get when you try to control the minds of a species that spent millions of years fighting for survival. We don't break under pressure, we get stronger." News of both battles spread across the galaxy within hours. The Zephyrian fleet had been completely destroyed with minimal human losses. The Crystalline Collective's ground forces had been routed by colonial militia using nothing but local knowledge and righteous anger, but the most disturbing news for the galactic powers was the human response to their victories. Instead of offering terms or seeking negotiation, humanity simply broadcast a single message on all frequencies. The message showed Admiral Susan Clark standing on the bridge of her flagship, surrounded by the debris of the Zephyrian fleet. Behind her, human ships continued their systematic destruction of alien mining equipment. "This is the human defense fleet," she said calmly. "For 50 years, we tried to be the kind of species you wanted us to be. We followed your laws, respected your customs, and tried to solve problems through diplomacy." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "That approach has failed. From now on, any species that threatens human territory, human citizens, or human interests will face the full response of our military forces. We are done being nice." The transmission ended, but its impact would resonate throughout the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, a species had challenged the established galactic order and won. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human dominance had begun. The Granite Lords had ruled their sector of space for over 2,000 years. Their massive silicon-based bodies were nearly indestructible, and their war moons could crack planets in half. When news reached them of human victories against the Zephyrians and Crystallines, Stone Speaker Morthak responded with contempt. "Soft flesh creatures cannot stand against eternal stone," he rumbled to his war council. "Deploy the third war moon toward human space. We will show the galaxy that some powers are too great for these Deathworld animals to challenge." The third war moon was a marvel of Granite Lord engineering. 300 kilometers across, it was part space station, part weapon platform, and part mobile fortress. Its stone hull could withstand direct hits from most known weapons, and its gravitational manipulators could tear apart entire fleets. Vice Admiral Tony Parker watched the massive construct approach human space from his flagship, the Destroyer. Pack leader Volf's Fang, his deep strike force consisted of 50 ships, each one built for speed and stealth rather than raw firepower. Against the War Moon's overwhelming size and strength, conventional tactics would be useless. "Sir, the alien vessel is 20 times larger than our entire force combined," reported Commander Jenny Foster from the tactical station. "Their weapons have enough power to destroy entire planets." Tony smiled grimly. "Commander, they're thinking like prey animals. They built something big and tough and slow, assuming that would keep them safe. But they forgot something important about pack hunters." He opened a channel to all ships in his force. "All vessels, this is Admiral Parker. Today we're going to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between size and effectiveness. The Granite Lords think their big rock makes them invincible. Let's show them what human ingenuity can do." The human ships spread out in a pattern that looked random to alien observers but followed principles of pack hunting that were millions of years old. They approached the War Moon from multiple angles, never presenting a single target for the massive vessel's weapons. When the battle began, it looked hopeless. The War Moon's main cannon fired beams of pure gravitational force that could have shattered asteroids. But the human ships weren't where the weapons were aimed. They had analyzed Granite Lord technology for decades and knew exactly how long their targeting systems took to lock on. "Phase 1 complete," Tony announced. "All ships implement Tactic 7. What happened next redefined space warfare." The human vessels seemed to flicker in and out of existence, using experimental phase shift technology that allowed them to pass through solid matter for brief moments. They materialized inside the War Moon's defensive shields, fired their weapons at critical systems, and phased back out before return fire could reach them. But Tony's real strategy was more subtle than hit-and-run attacks. His ships weren't trying to destroy the War Moon directly. They were targeting its industrial systems, its supply lines, and its support infrastructure. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the War Moon," Jenny reported. Stone Speaker Morthak's massive form appeared on the main screen. His rock-like features showed confusion and growing anger. Human vessels, you fight without honor. Face. U.S. in direct combat as warriors should. Tony's response became one of the most quoted statements in military history. Honor is a luxury for a species that can afford to lose. We can't, so we don't. Communication ended and the human attack intensified. But now it expanded beyond just the war moon. Tony's forces had identified every Granite Lord facility within 50 light-years and were systematically destroying them all. Supply convoys exploded as human, ships materialized from hyperspace at point-blank range. Mining stations vanished in balls of fusion fire. Communication relays went silent one by one as invisible human raiders struck and disappeared. On Earth, President Maria Santos addressed both the human population and the galaxy at large. Her speech was broadcast on every frequency and translated into every known language. For 50 years we played by their rules, she said, standing in the White House press room with the flags of every human colony behind her. We accepted their condescension. We pretended that diplomacy would work with beings who saw us as animals to be managed. She paused, looking directly into the camera. But we are not animals. Or rather, we are the most successful predator species in known galactic history. We survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and plagues that should have wiped us out completely. We did this by being smart, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when survival was at stake. The president's next words sent shockwaves through every capital in the galaxy. The galaxy has declared war on humanity by threatening our colonies and stealing our territory. We accept that declaration. But understand this, we do not fight wars the way you do. We fight them the way our ancestors fought to survive on a world that was actively trying to kill them. We fight to win, completely and permanently. As she spoke, reports flooded in from across human space. The third war moon had gone silent. After suffering catastrophic system failures, Granite Lord industrial capacity was being systematically destroyed. And most terrifyingly, human fleets were beginning to move toward the homeworlds of every species that had voted against them in. The Council, the depth swimmers, made the mistake of thinking they could blockade Earth itself. Their vast fleets of bioships had dominated the galaxy's oceans for centuries, and they believed their numbers would overwhelm the human home system. Admiral Jennifer Cole commanded Earth's home defense fleet from the depths of the Pacific Ocean. Her ships had been built in underwater facilities that no alien survey had ever detected, using technology that combined human engineering with reverse-engineered alien systems. "Sir, depth swimmer fleet is entering the outer system," reported Captain Roy Campbell from his submarine-like vessel. "Count is over 3,000 ships. They're demanding Earth's immediate surrender." Jennifer smiled as she watched the alien fleet approach. The depth swimmers had made the same mistake as every other species. They assumed that human space combat doctrine would be similar to their own. "All ships, implement Formation Omega," she ordered. "Let's show them what happens when you threaten the human homeworld." The battle for Earth was unlike anything in galactic history. The human defense fleet didn't meet the depth swimmer armada in open space. Instead, they used Earth's own gravity, and magnetic field as weapons. Human ships emerged from hiding positions throughout the solar system. Some had been concealed in asteroid fields, others had been lurking in the shadows of planets and moons. They struck the depth swimmer fleet from every direction at once, using the same pack-hunting tactics that had served humanity since the dawn of time. But the real surprise was Earth itself. The planet's defense network included gravitational manipulators that could redirect asteroids and comets, magnetic field generators that could disrupt alien electronics, and most importantly, weapons platforms built into the moon that had been disguised as research stations for decades. The depth swimmer fleet found itself caught in a three-dimensional maze of death. Human ships attacked from above and below, while Earth's defenses struck from directions the aliens hadn't even considered possible. Admiral Cole's final message to the surviving depth swimmers became another piece of human military legend. "You came to our home, you threatened our families. Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared for this? The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Depth Swimmer invasion force. Of the 3,000 ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 50 escaped to carry news of their defeat back to their homeworld. Within days, the Depth Swimmer government formally surrendered rather than face total extinction. But their capitulation only encouraged other species to seek human protection rather than face human wrath. The Altarian Republic, the Vegan Trade Federation, and dozens of minor species announced the formation of the Human Defense Coalition. They had watched humanity's victories and decided they would rather be protected by humans than conquered by the old galactic powers, but the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The artificial intelligence collective known as the Logic Engines, who had remained neutral in galactic politics for centuries, sent a message to Earth. "We have observed your species for 50 years, the message said in perfectly synthesized human speech. We calculate that your approach to survival and expansion has a 97.3% probability of long-term success. We request alliance with humanity for mutual benefit." Even the machines wanted to be on humanity's side. As reports of victory after victory reached Earth, President Santos met with her military advisors to discuss the new reality. The galaxy's power structure had been completely overturned in less than 6 months. "Status report," she ordered. General Don Foster consulted his datapad. "The Zephyrian swarm has been eliminated as a military threat. The Crystalline Collective is requesting terms for conditional surrender. The Granite Lords have lost 60% of their industrial capacity and are retreating to their core systems. The Depth Swimmers have formally capitulated. What about the minor powers? Most are either joining our coalition or offering neutrality agreements. A few are still testing our resolve, but intelligence believes they'll fall in line once they see what happened to the major powers." Admiral Jake Morrison stood in what remained of the Galactic Council chamber 6 months after humanity had stopped being nice. The Great Assembly Hall that had once held 10,000 delegates now accommodated fewer than 100. The missing species were either extinct, conquered, or had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely. The station itself bore scars from the conflicts that had reshaped the galaxy. Hull breaches had been patched, but the repairs were visible reminders of battles fought in the corridors where diplomacy had once reigned. Human security forces now patrolled areas that had been neutral ground for centuries. Jake walked to the podium where he had made his final diplomatic speech months earlier. Today he returned not as a supplicant seeking recognition, but as the representative of the galaxy's new dominant power. The transformation still amazed him. The remaining delegates watched nervously as he approached. These were survivors from species that had chosen surrender over extinction, wisdom over pride. They included former Queen Voice Zach Th of what remained of the Zephyrian swarm, her compound eyes no longer holding the arrogance that had once defined her people. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and listened to you vote to steal human territory and relocate human families. Jake began, his voice carrying easily through the smaller space. Today, I return to establish the terms under which this galaxy will operate from now on. He activated a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Large sections of space that had once been controlled by major powers now showed as either destroyed, abandoned, or under human protection. The Zephyrian swarm attempted to take our mining rights by force. Their military capacity has been reduced by 94%. The Crystalline Collective tried to relocate our colonists using psychic coercion. Their pacification fleets no longer exist. The Granite Lords sent their war moons to crush us. Those moons are now debris fields orbiting dead worlds. Each statement was delivered with calm precision, but the weight of destroyed civilizations hung heavy in the air. The surviving delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Depth Swimmers blockaded Earth itself, believing their numbers would overwhelm us. Their species' government surrendered unconditionally after losing their entire invasion fleet. These are the consequences of treating patience as weakness and diplomacy as stupidity. Jake paused, looking around the chamber at faces that represented the remnants of galactic civilization. Some showed fear, others resignation. A few displayed what might have been relief. But humanity did not fight this war for conquest or revenge. We fought it because you forced us to choose between survival and submission. We chose survival, as our species always has. He changed the display to show the new political structure of the galaxy. Large areas were now marked as human protection zones, where dozens of minor species had sought shelter under Earth's military umbrella. The Human Defense Coalition now includes 47 species who have chosen cooperation over conflict. They enjoy full protection of human military forces in exchange for peaceful behavior and mutual assistance. This is not conquest. This is the natural result of smaller species seeking protection from larger predators. Former Queen Voice Zach TH raised one of her remaining arms. Jake nodded for her to speak. Admiral Morrison, she said, her voice lacking its former buzzing arrogance. My people, what remains of them, wish to know our fate. Will humanity allow the swarm to continue existing? Jake studied her for a long moment. The being who had once dismissed humans as primitive animals now pleaded for her species' survival. The irony was not lost on him. Your people will be allowed to rebuild on designated worlds under human oversight. Your military capacity will remain restricted to defensive forces only. Any expansion beyond your assigned territory requires human approval. These restrictions will remain in place until your species proves it can coexist peacefully with its neighbors. Relief flooded Zaktiet's features. Several other delegates straightened hopefully. The same terms apply to all surviving major powers, Jake continued. The galaxy has seen what happens when aggressive species are allowed to threaten others without consequence. That age is over. He activated another display showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The distribution was strategic, covering major trade routes, population centers, and potential conflict zones. Human defense fleet patrols now monitor all major shipping lanes and population centers. Any species that engages in unprovoked aggression against another will face immediate intervention. We will not allow the strong to prey upon the weak as was common practice before this war. A delegate from the Vegan Trade Federation stood up. Unlike the defeated major powers, the vegans had voluntarily joined the Human Defense Coalition early in the conflict. Admiral, how do we know that humanity will not become like the old galactic powers? How do we know you will not abuse this authority? It was the question Jake had been expecting. The same fear that had driven the galaxy's power structure for millennia, that the strong would inevitably exploit the weak. Because we remember what it was like to be dismissed and threatened by beings who thought they were superior, Jake replied. We remember what it felt like to have our homes endangered by species who believed might made right. We will not become what we fought against because we have seen the cost of such behavior. He gestured to the damaged chamber around them. Look around you. This is what happens when diplomacy fails and force becomes the only language anyone understands. Billions died in conflicts that could have been avoided if the major powers had simply respected the rights of smaller species. Jake's expression softened slightly as he continued. Humanity did not want this war. We tried for 50 years to find peaceful solutions to galactic problems. We were patient when you were arrogant. We were diplomatic when you were dismissive. We offered cooperation when you demanded submission. But patience has limits, and ours were finally exceeded. The chamber remained silent as delegates absorbed his words. Many had lived through the transformation from the old galactic order to the new human-dominated system. The change had been violent but remarkably swift. The Galactic Protection Accord is now in effect, Jake announced, activating a final display that showed the new treaty structure. All member species agreed to resolve disputes through arbitration rather than warfare. Human forces will respond to any violations of this accord with overwhelming force. The cost of aggression is now too high for any rational species to pay. As the session concluded, delegates began filing out of the chamber. Many stopped to speak, quietly with human officials, seeking clarification on various aspects of the new order. The age of casual warfare between species was ending, replaced by a system enforced by beings who had proven they could destroy entire civilizations. When pushed too far, Jake remained at the podium as the chamber emptied, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had never wanted to become the galaxy's enforcers. They had simply wanted to be left alone to develop their colonies and explore the universe in peace, but the galaxy had forced them to choose between submission and dominance. Characteristically, humans had found a third option, becoming protectors rather than conquerors. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. The message was from Earth's deep space monitoring stations, reporting first contact with a new species at the galaxy's rim. The newcomers were already demonstrating aggressive behavior toward nearby peaceful civilizations. Jake smiled grimly as he prepared to leave the chamber. It seemed some species never learned from the mistakes of others, but that was fine. Humanity had developed considerable expertise in teaching such lessons. The galaxy had learned that the day the Deathworlders stopped being nice was the day everything changed forever, and the species that forgot that lesson did so at their own peril.